So I realize as I'm looking at my sheet, I don't know if I went over, I think I did go over ground rules. So we'll have a discussion at about 45 minutes. We'll do a time check and we'll answer questions from the Zoom chat. But as I said, I'm terrible at reading the chat. So I'm hiding the chat so I don't see it. So don't feel like I'm being rude to you guys if I don't read it. Okay, so I asked you why run for council. That's an easy one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Super easy. You talked about what it's been like to run in the 2nd district. Knocking on doors, that's great. What are the things that you love most about the 2nd district? I mean, I know that I walk and I got my favorite restaurants and everything. What's your jam?
Well, truly the reason that I've loved Long Beach is the diversity of Long Beach is the best thing. I love walking, in the 2nd district and seeing just all kinds of people, colors and faiths and beliefs and backgrounds. That's super important to me. I love the food. And so in case you haven't noticed, like this shirt is a little tight from COVID. I like the food too much. So I do, I love being able to, I've gone months and never had to use my car. I know some of you don't like it, but I do like the scooter, and I've scootered around hills to my meetings.
Scooters are coming back, guys. Just out last week.
I love that I can walk and it's so easy, or Uber, and I love all that about a downtown, and one of the reasons why I'm down here, and then also the food. I mean, we have great food. Lola's up on 2nd, that green sauce, and we have all kinds of great food that I love here. So
it's awesome. I love living right by 4th Street because I get to, it's my backyard.
That's great drinks. Dr. Lewis. Pizza.
Okay, enough with the fun food and easy questions. How long have you lived where you live?
I have been in downtown Long Beach for over 10 years. And I have 2 condos down here.
2 condos down here. 10 years.
Yes.
You got neighbors. People are talking about your neighbors. You got neighbors that can vouch for you?
Yes, absolutely. I love that too. Let me tell you, the neighbors have really chimed in, on that, and that's great. So we moved over to our new place on the West Tower 2 years ago.
Okay. And I know, when I was running for office, the opposition, including the POA and folks, they like to do mail pieces on me because I was standing up for hotel workers' rights at the Westin. And so there's a couple of mail pieces out there of me with a bullhorn. Okay. But I understand you also have a bullhorn.
I do. Here's my bullhorn.
As we were prepping for this call, she said, well, sometimes I lose my voice and I use a bullhorn. I was like, wait a second. So they're going to back you with a bullhorn, but I'm no good. Okay. No kidding. Teasing you. So you've lived there in the condo you're in now for 2 years, but you've been in that building, those 2 buildings, the, what do you call them?
I've been in downtown for over 10 years. And my daughter, unfortunately, has lost her job due to COVID. And she was out in Vegas, so she's back down in Long Beach, and she's living in my 1-bedroom.
Awesome. Oh no, don't freeze up on me now that thank you for answering that question. The other question that we want to just get out of the way is husband home or somebody? Hi.
Yes, he just got in. He was just walking around. Did you see him?
I see your eyes like. So you want to say hi? Where are you?
He was like, he was coming around, and I'm like, oh, you're fine. Come on in.
That's fine. So the first question was about where you live. I know that, I don't know if it was before or after I decided to run, but I went to your home where you are now, and I remember seeing you talking to a lot of neighbors in the lobby. They seemed to know you, friendly, all of that. So I have no reason to believe otherwise.
Great. And the great thing about being from Long Beach is, like, even our concierge here, like her mom and I went to school together. Say hi to Randy.
Hi, Randy, and 32 other people.
Hey, buddy.
Hi. Good to see you. We're just giving her the 3rd degree. Maybe you can give us some pointers.
30 years in a row, no breaks.
Oh gosh, run. No kidding.
Love her dearly. See y'all later.
Great, thanks, Randy. It's Randy, right?
Yes, Randy.
Okay, so ETA, you got yourself in a media frenzy because something happened. Tell everybody what happened and tell me what's going on right now.
So ETA has sold, and I am very, I started working on selling the business, years ago. So I'm happy to say it's sold. It's sold to
Sold, totally done. No, like last minute. Somebody can go look it up right now, and it's going to be like your name's nowhere on there.
Yes, it's done. It was a local woman that bought it from San Pedro, and I'm just happy that she decided to keep the business here in downtown Long Beach, and she's kept all the employees.
Great. And I think it's really important going back to the beginning of the conversation, right, where we talk about like women and double standards and how much we have to prove ourselves for everything. The conflict of interest for you happens if you get elected and you start. So there's not a conflict right now, but recognizing that obviously it's taken you a year to sell this business of yours. So it's good to hear that it's sold. Hopefully constituents and them can look up whatever information to demystify whatever questions they might have. But I'm taking you at your word.
Please do. In fact, we even had folks have called me about about this, and I hope everyone does do that. And listen, ETA is something I'm proud of, just like I was proud of the Post and growing that and selling that as well. And you always feel good when you build these companies and good people come in and take them over. And so, but selling a business is a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
But yes.
Well, if you could answer, I don't want to harp on this too much, but I just want to make sure that since we have us on video and we're doing this, that we get all the questions really answered. You had said before that it was sold, right? And what happened with the last sale? Just like
so, we went to a contract, but he didn't meet up with his obligations, and so we got lawyers and new brokers and everything involved. So,
and there's no worry that that'll happen again.
No.
Okay, cool. Next question. Okay, some people, and there's no secrets here. Police Officers Association and I know your husband is there. They've never been my biggest fan. When I ran on police reform, and I ran with the idea that we needed to have transparency, accountability, that we needed to make sure that we were spending resources in the right places. That's why the very first budget item I did was the HEART team, the homeless engagement and response team. And that was really to make sure that we had paramedics going out to homeless people instead of police officers. That was a reallocation of some resources that way. And I've tried to work with them through things, but I got this situation that happened on the side of a freeway that just made everything kind of blow up. But they fully support you. And we want to understand, constituents want to understand, what does that support mean to you? How are you going to push back? Let's just start with the investment in the campaign. I know there's some people that have questions about what a donation to a campaign means. Can you talk about resources that you've received from POA?
Yes, and so I have received $400 in the primary, and I did not accept any resources from them, which is $400 is the max in the general. One of the things that I think is a confusion for people is the IE versus the campaign. And so a lot of that I'm seeing out there, they're talking about an independent, expenditure, and it's not something that or money that I received as far as my campaign, because we have limits.
Great. Well, hold on one second. Hey, folks in the chat box, I don't know what's being said over here because I can't read it. So just be respectful and mindful that we're not going to read all of them until the end. And it's not an opportunity for us to create more negative candor in between everybody. Things are really hot right now, I feel like, with COVID and everything else. So what I heard you say, Cindy, is that they gave you $400. You spent that $400, right, already? So you can't give that $400 back. What people might or might not understand is that there's a campaign that Cindy gets to make every call on, every decision and everything else. And then there's what's called an independent expenditure campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a campaign where people have unlimited amount of money that they can raise and put in. So the IE that was done for me was hotel workers, building trades people, and the IE against me was all the hotels and the apartment association. So the IE that was for you included some POA money, and that's money that you have no control over. So I just making sure that everybody understands that there's nothing, she can't say yes or no to that money. They're not allowed to talk.
Really against the law, like you cannot coordinate with IEs.
Right.
And,
so
go ahead.
Some people have asked if you would give back the money that you've received, and legally you've already spent it, so you can't give back. Have you donated to any organizations?
I have. I've donated to social justice organizations, including Black Lives Matter, but I'll continue to support those social justice causes. But I know I've been asked that, and so I absolutely will. But I do appreciate you asking this question about the money, and really want to make sure that we work through this with the POA, that people understand that they're not doing me any favors by creating IEs. But again, I don't have any control with what they're doing.
So one of the conversations that's come up has been, people have asked, well, should city unions be able to give to candidates or not? And I mean, I have, like, IAM has given me money for my campaigns and also for my office holder. If we put, a statement that says until communities deem it worthy, that you wouldn't personally accept any more money from POA or people that are under kind of public scrutiny. Is that something that you would be comfortable with?
Say that again. I wouldn't do what?
Accept money from someone that is under public scrutiny. So
Okay.
Right now, police officers are under scrutiny, and POA is their arm of power. Would you be okay with not accepting that until we feel like we've gotten through reconciliation?
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Can you, my ex-husband's grandfather was a police officer in Houston, Texas. And I'm not sure if Brandy is listening right now, but in the area that Brandy knows very well.
Mm-hmm.
And he retired, and he passed away a couple months after he retired. I understand that that's something that tends to happen to people that live high anxiety, like high stress level jobs, is that their heart is so used to that adrenaline.
Yes. They have a very short lifespan, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely hard. And I remember being really honest with POA and folks and saying, I would never want that job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems like a job that would be extremely stressful. What was it like for you to be a woman on the police force? One, and then two, from your experience, what changes do you think need to happen?
Okay, so those are two very big questions. So let me just start. One of the things that I like people to know is I come from a very diverse family. I'm the only one. My siblings that married white.
Don't read the chat box.
I completely. Oh, sorry. I'm not reading the chat box, so because I only see your. Okay. And so because I come from a very diverse family, I already went into police work knowing, there's a difference the way my kids are treated than my family members who are Black or Latino. And so I was very aware of that. And one of the reasons why I wanted to become a police officer is growing up in these marginalized neighborhoods like I did. It's the most underserved. It's the most victimized. I hated all of that. And that's what put the fire in my belly to want to go in the neighborhood. And I worked in the same area that I grew up in. And also one of the things that's really important is that I think that we're missing today is really having people that understand their neighborhoods and understand their cultures, and they understand the folks. When the police officers would like to say that me and Brian Tuliao were like some of the most popular cops, and we would be walking through through the courthouse, and everyone, like criminals and people that were there, we're the only police officers that they talked to. They're like, "Hey, Cindy, what's going on?" And I always remember that. And the reason I had that respect, I mean, we may not agree on things, and sometimes I have to keep people to jail. But the one thing I can tell you is that coming from that neighborhood and I understood the culture, and I think that's going to be really important as we look at, what we can do better with regards to community policing, and we can, and maybe this is where we talk about what does that reform, look like? Because one of the things that I was talking about in the primary was true community policing. And I know that Tonia's on here. She'll remember this too. But back in the day, we had the PAL program. So get out of the uniform, get into our communities, get to know our communities. I worked with at-risk youth, and who knows the differences that I have an opportunity to make in young people's lives by doing that. And all of those things have gone away. So when we start talking about, true police reform, I think that we first have to reimagine, what the role of a police officer would be, and also acknowledge that we did things wrong and say, you're sorry. There's never going to be any reconciliation if we're not able, to do that, and understanding. And part of that, and one of the things that I know we talked about this earlier, that I have sure enjoyed, is being on all these listening sessions. And
you've been participating in the reconciliation?
Yes. And just I've learned more about Black history, and just learn more about the issues, and has really helped me form a lot of opinions that I have today. And those were so important. But I'm telling you that trust is the best crime fighting tool. And if we don't, people don't want to be over policed. So if we've got to get out of a uniform and get back in our community. And I love that when I was a cop, it was my favorite part, is just walking and talking to people and walking into the businesses and all of that. So in that, we just, for a lot of reasons, budgets probably, but we're not doing that anymore.
So you said we have to recognize what we did wrong. Mm-hmm. What do you believe has been wrong about the policing model or the culture?
Well, I just, the data doesn't lie. When you look at, incarceration, when you look at, tickets, when you look at just the economic opportunities that have not existed, when you look at health, I mean, there's so many, inequities, and we cannot deny that. There is systematic racism that is throughout our systems. And I think the first part to fixing, or to even reconciliation, is acknowledging that's there and it happens.
So I don't think we talked about this, but it's been a while since you've been a cop.
Yes. 22 years.
22 years.
22.
22. Is there a time because the data, as you said, the data doesn't lie, right?
Yeah.
We see the data, we know profiling happens, and we know that with systemic and structural racism, that is what it means, is that somebody might not see themselves as a racist, but they do activities that perpetuate a systematic racist society. Looking back, do you look back and go, oh, I recognize that maybe there was systematic racism that I was perpetuating and that you're aware of?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I have been gone for a little while, but listen, I'm not denying, someone asked me if I've made a marijuana arrest. And I know that when you look what's happened with marijuana and the Black community, and I'm sure I have. So I would have to say yes to that, and recognize that, that was a problem.
So you talked a little bit about what it was like to be a police officer. I know that you sent me a while back a list of kind of reform ideas. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can rattle off, what you think what you support doing right now and that you would continue to support if you were elected.
Yeah. So, I've thought about this a lot. In fact, I would like to, if any of you guys that are interested is definitely, I could talk about this for at least an hour on police reform. And I want you all to know that I am the very best person for police reform, just because of the lived experience, you know, that I have with this, and just the culture that I understand. But we first have to start with CPCC. And they have to be involved in the beginning of investigations. I mean, typically, or the CPCC, something is investigated, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds with this, but if they have an officer use of force, it's investigated.
Do you believe that our CPCC can be reformed, or do you believe we need something totally new?
Either or, whatever. I know that we have to go to the ballot box for that, but I think that we can reform that, and some other things we can do. And let me tell you why, Jeannine, because what I was going to explain is, when you have a use of force that's being alleged against an officer, it goes to the chain of command, and then it's investigated, and then it's fed down to the CPCC. So there should be an independent investigator at the very beginning, or there should be, we should have those folks at the table at the very beginning of an investigation, and not the end. So that's one thing that has to happen. And what that looks like, I think we're discussing that, but we need to change that. We also, the early warning system, listen, if we have to be able to recognize officers that have bad behavior, and we need to be able to take them out of the field. We also got to look at the way that we tag that bad behavior. And this is what I mean by that. So you have officers that their conduct is found sustained, non-sustained, unfounded. The only thing is that if you have some bad officers out there, and we want to, and they keep on having their behavior unsustained, we want to be able to look at that too. And I want to make sure that there are metrics that we're tracking that, because we could have an officer that's just maybe is good at getting away with things. I don't know, but I want to be able to track all of that behavior, and maybe even recode the way that we file that. Like, we don't need to investigate officers beyond, this is not the court of law. We can have a preponderance of evidence, and this officer has done enough things that has led us to believe that this behavior, and that's tagged, or they're taken out of the field. And then, we also need to, look at, civil service too. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but, most officers are good, and most officers, I don't, we want all of the bad officers, out of the force. And then, so when that happens, and then civil service overturns something and they get their job back, is a problem. So I don't have the answers to how you fix that, but we definitely need to do that. And then, look at the way we recruit, and are the policies that we're recruiting fair and equitable to everyone.
You mentioned cannabis. I mean, I know that I did a human relations audit and best practices, and one of them was to remove the, if somebody tested positive for cannabis, the city, for all 6,000 employees, was to not hire them. And one of the areas that the city pushed back on was for PD and fire, which I disagreed with, because I feel like if you can have a drink in the middle of the day, it doesn't mean that you showed up to work on Monday, drunk. Same thing with marijuana. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, so, and like I said, I've been gone a long time, but I do believe, like, I know from, for a short time, I did background investigations, that we disqualified a lot of great candidates for cannabis, especially African-Americans. And so I think they did need to re-examine that policy, because we lost a lot of really great candidates. And I think back then it was 5 years or 3 years. Don't quote me for sure, but it was quite a long time that you had to not use cannabis to get hired. And I absolutely agree that we need to look at that. We also need to look at how we're recruiting, how we're doing the background investigations of the officers that we are hiring. We have to really, we have to be able to identify, do they have these racist, misogynist tendencies, and we've got to do better at that too. One of the things that is loud and clear is that the community will not tolerate this behavior from the police department. And so I was talking about, reform, and what that looked like, especially when we were talking about, I know you started as a quality of life officers, and it's something that we're going to, I'll keep on pushing, because it's really important to the community, and it's important to me.
So I want to push back on two things and hear your thoughts on it. You mentioned hiring in civil service, and I completely agree with those things. And you also mentioned good cops, which one of the things that I said before with, my ex's grandfather was he had a heart of gold, and he wouldn't arrest people if they were drunk driving. He would, take them to a coffee shop and make them sober up and give them a good, guilt trip and let them go on their way. But the systemic part is what's hard for people, right? So I'm sure that there are people that are listening that heard you say good cop. And the question right now is, how do we change the culture from the top down that says that if you see one of your fellow officers doing something that you think is wrong or that is morally unjust, how do we change the culture to allow for officers to speak up or to step in? Because it's clearly not happening, right?
Well, we have to. And so one of the things that I know to be a case, my very good friends that I went to the academy with, committed suicide. And I'm sure a lot of you maybe know about this. And he was one of the good ones. And I think that it's a lot of, there's a lot of, pressure. There's a lot of officers have PhD. I think the stat is they're 50% more likely to kill themselves than any other profession.
Extremely high, yeah.
It's extremely high. So I think that what we have to do, there's a stigma that comes with mental health. And a lot of officers that suffer, that have mental health issues, and they won't talk about that. And I think that that's where we have to start, because absolutely, it made me sick, just like the rest of you. When you saw what happened to Mr. Floyd, those officers that sat there and watched that are just as guilty. And so we want to make sure that we create a culture within the department that
how do we do that? I mean, I think that's the big question. Like, how do we create that culture?
Well, and I think it starts with mental health and having peer groups and having
more than I'm a mental health advocate, big time. But there's something that's happening that there's somebody that's scared of talking about it.
Yeah.
Like whether it's like people feel like, and I guess maybe this is the question I want to get your take on, and then we can move past this part. People feel like there's a brotherhood and that you can't speak up against your fellow officers if you see something wrong. Yeah. Whether it's where people can file complaints or they can file reports, but it's anonymous. Like, are there procedural things that you think can happen that help shift that culture?
Well, I go back to, maybe in the recruiting process, we have to be recruiting the right people from the neighborhood and finding people that understanding that they can handle this job. And obviously, there are identifying those that that can't, and then making sure. I think that more than ever, that we want to make sure that police officers understand. I mean, you have a right to, you have to, intervene. And this is one thing that is hard for me, Jeannine, because I just, I would never tolerated that or stood for in anything like that. But I understand that there are those officers that have, and I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you there's a lot of mental health issues, and we have to create an environment, and we need bosses, and we need command staff, and we need leaders, and people that are going to hold the police accountable. Mm-hmm. And we're going to say that we, and be able to identify these red flags. Yeah. Because if we can identify red flags, then we can take people out of the field. It's not always going to be perfect, but we have to do a better job of looking at these early warning systems and these bad behaviors.
Thanks, Cindy. I know I kind of drilled down on there. I know the people that are watching that those questions, those words will trigger for them and want direct answers. So you also mentioned in our chat, we chatted about wellness checks. We chatted about neighborhood disputes. What are the things that officers shouldn't be doing right now that you feel like, or do you agree that officers have been given every task under the sun?
I do. I mean, we can't ask officers to solve every single problem. And so one of the things that we have to is like when we talk about, reimagining what the role of a police officer is and what, assignments that we want them to have. I think that's really important. I mean, do we need officers handling homelessness? Homelessness is not a crime. Mental health issues, I don't know that should be handled by officers. Well checks, and I don't know for some of you who don't know what that is, but oftentimes you'll have someone that has drug issue, that's overdose, or maybe you're checking on the grandparents' well-being, and most of the time it's medical. Does it make sense for police officers to be handling those type of calls? Neighborhood disputes, civil service stuff. I mean, right now, if you're in the front of your house and a palm tree falls over and hits the car, you call the police. Mm-hmm. So for vandalism, graffiti, I mean, there's so many things that are that are in that we need to really step back and say, and I love it when I hear people, and I've heard people say this over and over again, but I'm all for it. Like, what does the police role look like, and what are we okay with the police handling?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it. Okay, let's see. CPCC, civil service. All right, well, I know that maybe we don't have a case of this in Long Beach, but we know that when we're fighting like structural inequities and structural racism, we've heard in other cities that police officers have a certain view of Black Lives Matter. So you mentioned that you've donated to them before. Do you welcome this dialogue that's happening right now and the push to make sure that we're centering the conversation in Black lives, or do you have other thoughts on it?
No, of course, I so welcome diversity. And for those of you that don't know me, I welcome that on this call, please, I will talk to you. I will come have coffee with you. I want you to get to know me. I love Long Beach. I love the diversity. My family is a very diverse family, and Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter in my family, the Brown Lives Matter in my family. And if if I should be elected, I will continue to work to make sure that the Black and brown communities are supported.
So I'll ask one question. The framework document came out, and last night there was a framework session with key stakeholders that were invited to review that document, and it got pretty emotional for a lot of people because the city staff they changed the words. They took Black out and they put people of color in. Mm-hmm. And there's a belief that was done, by people in city staff for a certain reason. Council, we have the last vote. We get to decide what goes in that document. What is your take on including, very much calling out, it is our Black community members that have suffered the most at the hands of police, the most at the hands of the city, the most at poverty? Do you have an issue with that?
No, not at all. I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's okay. I know that you don't have the context.
Referring to, but absolutely not.
Yeah. So often as an elected official, our job, I've always seen my job as a mediator in between the public mm-hmm. and city staff. And city staff being that bureaucracy that tends to just get in their little wheel, and it's really hard for them to tune into the realities of what's happening. And this is one thing that I think is really key. Mm-hmm. And so that leads me to the next question. How do you, if you're elected, see yourself working with the public and working with community groups? What kind of structure are you going to have in place to make sure that you've got constant communication with them?
So one of the things that I am blessed that this is all I'm going to do. This is my love, and I want to work for District 2. And so I've always done this when I was going through the primary. And in fact, I was talking to a constituent yesterday who said, yeah, you knocked on my door 3 times. And we got a time to talk and really like dive down African-American. And he had a lot of questions for me on police reform and on, just what does it look like as far as economic recovery. But I love having those conversations, making myself accessible and being present is very important. That has been, I can attribute a lot of my success to that, and making sure that I'm available and just hearing people out. And it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on everything, but I'm committed, to doing that with my constituents and, participating as much stuff as I can. Me and my husband are just kind of like junkies. We like going to everything, especially if we hear some, live music going on. And so I just I love this part of this is just being out and just driving with like my neighborhood and my neighbors and getting to know people. So I can tell you
awesome area to do that in, huh?
Yeah, it's like the best.
That's great. I would say some of the best practices that I did, particularly in the first 2 years, staffing changed a little bit, but the first 2 years we had people that were in the field knocking on doors regardless of the campaign. And that really helped us because a lot of the work, while these are big topics that we're talking about right now, a lot of the work is potholes, tree trimming, graffiti removal, trying to get as many people as possible to get their Go Beach app. And those are the things that tend to take up a lot of time, but also build trust. Even if you disagree with some of these topics, you're able to have trust with your constituents that way.
Yeah, and I realize that knocking on doors, it's the small things that matter to people, and so when we talk about those quality of life, there were countless times that I got on the app and just took care of stuff like that, because I care.
Well, it's a good thing. So I want to, Carla is on the call, my homegirl. Carla, do you have the poll results? Because I realize we've talked about the top 3 issues. Boom. 25% of people want a vision for the district. 50% want to know how you've handled police issues. We've spent about 30 minutes on police issues. We'll get back to that at the end. Residency status, housing, community safety, budget, and COVID. So at least we know what people want to hear. And I think it's clear from some of these numbers. So for people that might have just joined us, like a Max, we already answered that question at the beginning. She lives in the 2nd district. She's lived in the current building, in the current spot for 2 years, but in that building for 10 years. So moving on then, what I want to do is we've got, this kind of set up. We've got a lot of other questions that were sent into us, everything from businesses, how you're going to support minority businesses, your take on housing, your take on the LGBT community. But why don't we start off with what, now that we've spent a chunk of time on PD, why don't we take some time and say, what are your top 4 things that you think are most important?
So definitely. And so I also want to say real quickly before I jump into that, but if anybody hasn't checked out my issues on cindyallen.com, please do that. And you can dive down into that and you can look at the top issues. Because one of the things that I can tell you is that it has changed so much since, in the primary. The things we were talking about then is so different than today. So when we talk about, COVID and, what that means to the health of the community, and it's a major issue for everyone.
You wearing a mask out there, Cindy?
Yes, wear a mask.
What kind of hip mask do you have? Let's see it.
Oh gosh, okay, I do have my front door, but no, it's a major issue. We're all really concerned, about our health, and so we need to, make sure that we have, contact tracing, and that we're identifying any patterns that might exist. So we are, alerting the public and especially alerting anyone that is most vulnerable. And so that's going to be real important. And also it goes hand in hand with police reform that I talked about earlier, economic recovery, and what does that look like, as well as housing. One of the things that I can say that for sure is that everything that I have on my platform, I will look at through an equity lens. And so, although I didn't say that first, but all of that is everything.
What does that mean through an equity lens? What are questions you'll ask yourself to be able to do that?
Well, because when you look at, like, we start with COVID, we know that the Black and Brown communities, are more affected. We know that the housing, affordability are, we just know, listen, at the end of the day, it's been easier. And although I've worked hard and I have really done well, I know it's been easier for me because I'm white, and I acknowledge that. And so I have to, especially getting into public service, is acknowledge that all of the folks out there who haven't had the privileges that I have had. And so everything that we do, environment, everything that we need to look at this through an equity lens.
So the city, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we do have an Office of Equity. Rex brought that to council literally the meeting before I got sworn in. And we've been able to fight to make sure that we have funding in that Office of Equity. And one of the things that they did was a equity toolkit. And it's a toolkit that other cities like Seattle have used to be able, like one of the great examples is streetlights. Streetlights, it's darker in low income communities. Why is that? It's darker because people have to call, in a lot of cities, they have to call the city to say, hey, we need a new light. And people that are in those communities don't trust calling the city. They don't trust calling authority, whether it's because of their documentation, whether it's because of their background. And so creating policies that say, instead of having people call, let's make sure that we put it on a timed platform so that everybody, gets new lights before they run out. Things like that. So we have this toolkit. One of the items I did recently was ask the city to apply that toolkit to every single agenda item that comes forward. And we haven't started doing that yet, but it takes a little bit more staff time, but it really does. It has a whole bunch of questions and processes in place. Is that something that you would want to continue to see as a city practice once it's began?
I mean, absolutely. And then just to make sure that it has proper funding, because we can do all of this stuff when it comes to, equity and start all this stuff because it sounds good, it looks good. But I'm really going to be looking at that very carefully and making sure that we have funding, because if not, the good stuff that I was talking about, the community policing and all of this, if all this stuff, the good stuff gets cut, it's going to be a problem for me. And so I'll be absolutely an advocate of that. I think more than ever, we have private industries that are stepping up, and there are grants, and hopefully we can do everything on our part to make sure that we create more opportunities, economic opportunities for the Black and Brown communities, especially opening your own business.
What kind of support do you think people of color owned businesses should get from the city? You're frozen.
I mean, listen, it's hard, and we already have. I was advocating a long time ago, and I don't know if you remember this, but at the port, and anyone that would listen to me, when you look at the CalPERS disparity study in this state for contracting, if you are a Black female in this state, you are getting zero business. And so when you look at those inequities, and why is that happening? And why are we not holding people accountable? And why are we contracting the way that we're contracting? And you're contracting these bigger companies, but that money never funnels down. And so there's plenty of studies out there that show this.
And so do you think you can? I want to be mindful of time because we got 5 other topics. So what do you think? So remember, I said I would spend a lot of time on PD, and then we try to go spitfire through the rest. So what do you think that you as a council member could do for businesses of color?
Well, I mean, that's exactly like, working with a Long Beach Economic Partnership like I do now. And I'm leading that, that charge for grants for businesses with women of color. I was doing that long before this happened. And I will continue to do that. And also, I talked to a female business owner, African American, yesterday, and I was talking to her about her certifications and things like that. They're really tough, and maybe there's ways that we can help folks get their certification as a minority woman-owned business. We made those things so darn complicated that unless you're a big company and I know it was for me too. I probably was in business for 5 years before I ever got certified as a DBE or a woman-owned business.
Yeah.
Because of how hard these things are. We have to do more and making it easier and making it less complicated for these businesses. Because listen, we have to create wealth for the Black and brown communities, period. We have to help them and help. And I'm telling you, I've been passionate about this long before I was running for office, just because of the help that I've had along the way. And so I'll continue to do that in any way that I can, and making sure that these programs are funded and that we're focusing on that.
Great, thank you. So one of the areas that your opponent, Mr. Robert Fox, who I know there are people listening that have asked me if I've offered this to Robert. I want to be really clear. If Robert wants to do one of these, of course I'll do it. Of course. Love you, sweetie. Bye. But I also want to be really clear that when I was running, he was one of the people that, when I talk about a double standard for women, put mailers on every door that not only spelled my name wrong, but also spread lies about me and the reality that exists in the city. I will gladly spend 2 hours with him to walk through the exact same questions I'm asking you if Robert wants to do that.
And I've had the same experience with his bully-like behavior and name calling and the lies that he likes to put out there. So I can completely understand your pain with him.
Thanks. We don't need to make it about him. We want to, if he decides to come on the Jeannine show, that we allow him the same privilege. So, but one of the areas that he has been very passionate about is the land use element. When we were talking about the land use element, he was one of the most vocal people that spoke up. Linda Tatum was leading the efforts. We had more community meetings on that than I had seen at the time, which is why I'm really proud that we've done what we've done with the framework, whether or not it's difficult or easy process. Okay. But we would see one of our city directors, African-American woman, at the front of the room in a room of 500 people who were primarily white, saying, we don't want density in our neighborhoods. And it was throughout the city. And it was, we don't want those people here. And we don't want crime, and we don't want X, Y, and Z, increased congestion. And it got really heated then. It was the heated conversation of 2 years ago. Today, it's around police reform. I don't know what your stance is on land use element or increased density. I've heard you, and I've read statements that you've made around affordable housing. Yes. So if you could talk about your position on land use and affordable housing, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate that question. Hey, listen, at the end of the day, we have a housing crisis, and we absolutely have to create more affordable housing. I know that. I have knocked on enough doors. This is a no-brainer. And we know that our population is going to grow. And with that growth, this becomes, a public health issue. I don't want to see community members or residents sleeping out of their garage or sleeping, in their cars. And so I'm absolutely, in support of any, land use element that creates safe places for us to grow. I also supported the downtown, plan, which new updated downtown plan, which included, inclusionary housing.
The downtown plan did not include.
It did not, but it did. It does now,
We
though.
just passed an inclusionary policy, but the original downtown plan was the
Did not.
biggest
Yes.
disappointment I had.
I misspoke. Yes. But I absolutely support the new downtown plan that included inclusionary housing. And so at the end of the day, I think this land use element it's smart. It's a smart way to build affordable housing, and it's a smart way to also grow the economy.
Great. So to be clear, so there was a downtown plan in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of the community that advocated for affordable housing, linkage fees, and all of that. It did not get included. Right now, the city is beginning the process of a downtown plan that extends to the waterfront. That hasn't been finished yet, but we did just pass an inclusionary policy citywide. So I just want to make sure for folks that are listening that they have that information correctly. One of the things right now during COVID is rent moratorium. I would love to see a total waiver of rent for renters. I'm one of 2 renters on the council. Definitely live every rent's due next month and I'm not paying it. So I'm curious your stance on the rent moratorium and financial support. Do you support the city using CARES Act funding and other sources to pay for tenants' rents?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, tenants are having a really tough time right now. And the way that I am, we're looking at the numbers and how they're going up daily, I think it's only going to get harder. So, and not only do I support those protections, I also, I want to support the protections for small businesses too and residents, right? Because we want to make sure this is what's made Long Beach great is the diversity, and we have to make sure that we have those in place for those. And then also, I was talking to one of my friends, that's currently, being harassed by their landlord, and we have to just make sure that they, I know we have these anti-harassment policies in place, but we have to make sure that that's being enforced, because no landlord should not be doing that, period. And then also, relocation fees that we get. I think they're pretty low now. You might be able to talk on that more, but I think they're like, it's been a while since I looked at maybe like $1,000 or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Sorry, I did the mistake of reading the group chat. You guys are so awesome. I'm so glad I invited you on to spend an evening with us so you can call us liars. It's pretty fantastic. Yeah, I said I wasn't reading it. This group chat that's here is just one of the examples of why it's so difficult for people to run for office and then stay in office. So I really just want to say I appreciate you guys being all out respectable community members willing to engage us in an honest conversation. So thanks, guys. Cindy,
I'll sit right there because I'm not looking at it.
I know I made the mistake of pulling it up, and I love being called a liar whenever I speak the truth as often as possible, which I feel like is all the time, except when I had a moment that cost me the idea of running again. And so I just don't think that people realize that their words really have impact on people that are really acting in service to a greater cause. And so I know there's people in the chat that are being negative. I also know there are people that are actually genuinely listening. So I really appreciate them. The other question is something that we don't have control of, which is advocating for mortgages to be delayed. Same thing, like how do we support property owners, whether it's business or residential, and the city's hands are tied. But I know from talking to a lot of, property owners are a mixed bag. There's some that, want us to pay our rent yesterday and some that want to advocate at a state level. Are you comfortable with advocating at the state and federal level to make sure that mortgages can be postponed during this crisis?
Absolutely. And listen, there are so many property owners that I've talked to that are, if they don't get paid, they can't pay their mortgage. And then they, everyone loses the property. So it's a bigger problem. So I'm absolutely advocating for the state and federal funds to help these landlords is important. And I would absolutely, advocate for that.
Great. One of the other things I wanted to bring up that wasn't in the email questions, but we know when federal dollars are given to communities that they cannot be used for people that are undocumented. What is your stance? I mean, we haven't talked about immigration at all. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on immigration, the census, and being able to use federal funds?
Well, I mean, listen, if anybody understands the pain of what immigrants go through, I think it would be me. I mean, unfortunately, a year ago, I lost my niece in a car accident, and they've been married for 10 years. And her husband is on the list to be, deported. And just the pain that causes the family every day, what they have to go through, not using services, not driving a car because they're afraid of being pulled over by the police.
I'm very sorry to hear of your loss. I did hear that previously. Sorry. Mm-hmm. How would you advocate for undocumented residents as a council member?
Well, I mean, in every way that I can, because so many undocumented folks, and even my nephews they're not undocumented, and they're still afraid. They're afraid of their dad being deported. So it's just crazy what this does to families. And any way that I can is my answer. Any way I can help. I know the pain of this, and I know how, and the trauma it causes on the children every day. They're not afraid to tell the truth. They're not afraid to talk to their teachers, all of this stuff that happens because they're so afraid of losing their dad.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. I know personal stories like that can be tough. Okay, let's see. Sake of time, COVID health crisis. We went over that. Minority-owned businesses, your priorities. Oh, one of the questions we didn't touch on when it comes to our economic recovery. Obviously, COVID's been a hit for not only residents, property owners, but one of the ways that Long Beach was really beginning to shine was events in the downtown and surrounding the downtown. Our tourism was at an all-time high. We know that we get TOT funds for their tourism. We know Steve Goodling has re-envisioned the convention center just to have it, be empty probably for another, at least until next year. What are ways that you see tourism coming back to the city of Long Beach?
Well, listen, tourism, until we're all health and safety, until people feel safe, COVID has really changed our life dramatically. And but I think that I'm super impressed with Steve Goodling, and I live right here, on the convention center, and I want to see these events come back as soon as it's safe to do so. And I think one of the things that the city is going to have to do is what does this look like? What do these outdoor events look like? And it's not that it's something that Steve hasn't already done. I loved one day, they had this huge event right here in the parking lot on the elephant lot. And I think that that Steve Goodling and his crew are super innovative. And I think when they can and it's safe, I can see working with them and working really hard to get people to come back into Long Beach and, inject our, economy again with folks that are eating at the restaurants and are supporting our local businesses.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. What have you personally done? So now I had my general topics that I wanted to ask you, but now I've got a long list of questions. I'm not going to ask them all. A lot of them were duplicates that kind of hit on the PD stuff. What have you done to address structural bias in communities that you've lived in?
Yeah. And so, I talked about this earlier and what I've already done in the time when I'm volunteering my time to make sure that we get grants for minority businesses, and I've done in the past, and just been an advocate. I remember one of my friend's businesses, Ash over here. He was really concerned because English is a second language, and it was really intimidating going through the licensing phase. And I said, Ash, you're going to come to me every morning, and I'm going to go sit over there and go through this process and make sure this gets done, because these are people's livelihoods. And I did that every day for a week. And to this day, he's like, you're my sister. But I'm like, I would do that for anyone. If the process is cumbersome, I have a heart for, people that are, trying to start their businesses. And then also the city is not always the most business friendly city either. And so how can we make it easier, for folks to be able to achieve their economic success?
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think that the question, like, around structural bias was probably around race, which you addressed at the beginning. We talked about immigration. What is your stance on the LGBT community, working with the center, working with Pride? I'm
very much an advocate, as you know, and many of you know. My daughter is gay. My sister-in-law. I mean, I have marched out in parade many times. In fact, that's the best thing I love about Pride is the parties I have before Pride. But I'm an advocate. I'm a lover. Will always, be supportive and understand that there are inequities that happen there as well. And but you have a champion in me.
Thanks. There's two things that have happened recently, and I don't want to call them out, but there's a question around, if you're gay, does that mean that you can't be a racist? And I bring that up because you're the person that you're running against has said it. And so I just want to hear your take on, well, I'm gay, therefore I'm not a racist.
I mean, it's or even comparing yourself to, understanding the lived experience of a Black person, that some of the things that I have heard, and no, I think that it's interesting with some folks, especially white men, who really don't understand their privilege and are not willing to recognize it. And just because you're from the gay community doesn't mean that you're not privileged or racist.
I tend to want to go on a philosophical chat about, well, what can we do to change it? But I have a long list of questions here. I'm getting all chatty, so I'll try to stay focused. The next question is, Nigel has endorsed you. I think he's on the call. Mm-hmm. And it says that he wants to recall the mayor. I don't know much about Nigel or if that's in fact true. Do you support the recall of the mayor?
Well, first of all, let me just talk about Nigel. Thank you, Nigel, for coming on this call. Mm-hmm. I really, really do like Nigel. And so one of the things, we're not going to agree on everything, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that we still don't have a respectful relationship, but I absolutely do not support recalling the mayor.
Great. And he's endorsed you. What is it about his endorsement that matters most to you?
Oh, it just matters because he's very smart. I've enjoyed, just like I have, Eduardo and Jeanette. I mean, they're super smart, super talented, all of which have, just a love for the second district, just like me. And at the end of the day, we have way more in common with each other. And it's just when I talked very soon after the election, I called him and I asked him if he would support me, and we've had conversations and we met, and I'm really honored to have his support.
Okay, let's see. Why are you a better candidate than Robert Fox?
Wow, you're going to ask me that?
This is the list of questions that was emailed to me.
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, I have found Robert Fox to be quite the egomaniac.
You can just talk about yourself.
Yeah, he just
talk about him.
He literally just likes to be the center of attention, and I don't have that ego. I really am truly doing this for the right reasons. I'm doing it because I want to still work with my community, and I want to work for everyone, not just a certain group of people. And that's what's important. You know, because you asked me why I'm a better candidate than Robert Fox. Robert Fox says he's done all of these things and he's been president of everything under the sun, but yet he doesn't have one single endorsement. How do you spend your time being president of all this stuff and nobody's endorsing you?
So I would say, what have you done? Why are you better? So you can talk about that without even mentioning his name. Yeah. What endorsements have you had and what experience do you have that makes you more qualified?
And I think, well, that's where I was going with this is because we have had, you know, when I announced that I was running, the support was incredible for me. And it's because I have spent genuinely so much of my life giving back to others. And it was really easy for people to support me and get behind me. And it's just, we talk about, you know, community service and giving back in ways that you don't have to sit here and brag about or talk about it. But I've done so much in my community, and it was really obvious when I decided to run for this office, when folks stepped up, and community leaders and businesses and residents and all of the folks that came out to support me. And one of the things that you asked earlier was, you know, who's there for you? And these are all the folks that are there for me. When, you know, when the times get hard, you know, these are the folks that I'm going to lean on. And one of the things that I've done a really good job at in my businesses that I've owned in the past is really, you know, first of all, you know, hiring a diverse group, but also, you know, hiring people that are smarter than me and surrounding myself with really good, talented people. And that's what I plan to do when I become your next councilwoman.
Nice close there. You mentioned hiring. I was going to ask it earlier, but do you already know who you're hiring if you were to get elected? Okay. No. And are you
one thing at a time, please?
Of course. Then the other thing is, one of the biggest issues, particularly for, I think, for white women, is when we're in positions to hire others, is how do we make sure that we're hiring people that look like the community that we're working in? The 2nd district is the most diverse district in the city. And so are you open to making sure that you do your due diligence to hire people of color, both Black and other people of color?
Absolutely. Just like I have, like I said, just like I've always done. I already have a record of doing that. My businesses that I used to own are better for the diversity that I brought to that, and you know, all the interns that I've mentored, very diverse. So yeah, no, that's important to me. It always has been, and yeah, I'll absolutely will make sure that that my team, you know, represents the community.
Great. So the last two are kind of, you know, I think questions that I hear more than anything. One of them is saying that they've never seen you participating at certain events that address social and environmental justice. Elaborate on why that might be. And so I'll let you answer that question first.
Yeah. I like what events specifically? I mean, I was out. I marched several times. In fact, with Nigel, him and I went out and we were on the steps. So yeah, and I think you know, I've definitely been out there, and
I've seen you at Black and White Ball before. I've seen you out. I can't remember exactly which events, but I know at least at the Black and White Ball a couple of years in a row, I think.
I tell you, it's really hard. I get invited to a lot of events, and there's not very many that I do not attend. So I love attending events in Long Beach. I always have, and I'll continue to do that. So if you haven't seen me, please, I will, please let me know. I will, I'm
send her events. Well, I mean, I know we're not doing public events right now, but Zoom events, send them her way. And then if you know you've invited her and she doesn't show up, then you can give her a hard time. So
right.
There you go. The other question is what I've heard, and I feel like we hear so much from the other candidate on every platform and the people that support him.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, when I decided that we would do this, and you and I decided to do this, the first thing people said was, oh my gosh, I haven't heard from her.
Mhm.
I haven't heard enough from her. I don't know anything about her. Where has she been? And why has she not been more present?
Mhm.
And so I want to give you an opportunity to talk about that. And if, to sit with the fact that second district residents feel that way,
Mhm.
and hopefully own that they feel that way, that you own that's their experience, and what you're going to do to make a change for these next 100 days. And then if you are privileged to get elected, it goes back to the question I already asked, which is how you're going to stay engaged with them.
And I tell you, thank you for that feedback. And I am always open to growth. And if there are ways to be innovative during these times, to be more participatory. And because, like I said earlier, that's one of the things I loved, is just being able to knock on doors. And so I'm anxious to talk to anyone that will talk to me, and I pretty much do that all day long. I feel like between the fundraising and then talking to candidates or participating, in these type of calls. So, but
people were to invite you to Zoom sessions like this.
Invite me to
maybe not recorded, maybe not on social media, but if AOC 7, ABNA, Orca, Rose Park, I know that I will tell you that when I was running for office, I didn't have support of the neighborhood associations, right? Eric Gray was running a year before me. He was the chosen child that was supposed to win, and I didn't have their support. I had a couple of random folks, but it has been the most rewarding experience getting to know these neighborhood leaders that have really partnered with me. I'm like, oh, it's been great. Yes. So I would hope that they will work with you, and that you will have that time with them, because every neighborhood, while is the same, there's a curb that needs to be fixed. There's a situation with a staff person, with city staff person, and they all have visions that they want to see followed through. And they really need an advocate that is going to partner with them to push city staff, because staff has everything on their plate, right? That 5 blocks that is a neighborhood association isn't their main priority. And it's your job as an elected official to make it their priority. And so I hope that you take that and meet with them.
Yes, it would be a privilege and an honor. And yes, I look forward to, over this period of time, I've already looked forward to the relationships and those of you that I have met. And I just look forward to, more of that happening.
Awesome. Great. Sorry, I had one of my neighborhood leaders text me. So after this call, I'm going to make sure that you get the contact information. I hadn't given you anybody's. I'm not somebody that sits there and gives out people's contact information, but for the neighborhood associations that want to connect with you, they can either go through your website, or they can ask me and I'll directly connect them to you.
And just so everyone knows too, like my cell phone number is on my my website. It's my email is cindy@cindyallen.com. Any of you are welcome to have my my phone number and call me whenever you have any questions, or you just want to have a talk.
Awesome. Okay, so that is the chunk of the questions. I mean, I think we covered PD. We didn't really touch on climate too much. There weren't a lot of questions about it, but obviously racial disparities as it pertains to the impacts of climate, the high asthma rates that our communities of color and Black community members face over our whites. I think it was referenced in the fun group chat over here, but there is a 17-year life expectancy difference in the city of Long Beach, and there's a 7-year life expectancy difference in my district alone. So whoever made the comment, you live on Ocean Boulevard, you're expected to live 7 years longer than the residents on 10th Street. And so how are you going to commit to make sure that you're not just focused in downtown, but that you're focused on that area, and that you're focusing on some of the climate issues as well?
Yeah, no, listen, the environment is a problem. I have to every single day, even being downtown, and I like having my doors open. I have to clean this set up every single day. And so whoever asked that question, listen, I understand. And like I said earlier, growing up on the West Side, like this is a problem. And so I will do everything that we can and pushing that, we are adhering to the climate action plan, that we're enforcing that we're transitioning to more electric. One of the things I can geek out on a little bit is that I had the privilege of doing is, introducing the electric bus fleets around the country to municipalities. And so I love all, that technology. And so for those of you who want to geek out on this, we can do that. And so those type of things to, lower our emissions and particulates that we're putting in the air, all that kind of stuff is going to be important to me.
I appreciate that. It's 7:30, so I would like to try to open up the Zoom chat box for questions, but I want to be very clear, like I have done in other public settings, that if we get more of what I'm reading right here, then we're just going to close it out and we're going to say goodbye, everybody. It's a wrap. I mean, we had 30-something participants. We've got 18 right now, not including ourselves. So I want to thank everybody that's tuning in, that's paying attention.
And I know it's been long too. I know we've been on for an hour and a half, and I don't know what
I expected that. I mean, this isn't a debate, and it's a very unique opportunity to just have a conversation with you. And people that want to hear from you can look back at this video. People that don't will probably take things from this video and use them how they see fit. And that is the divisive world that we live in. I'm gonna direct staff to open this. Yeah, I wish that we could block somebody. So I don't know some of these people, but we're gonna open it up, and participants that want to ask a specific question, if you could put those questions here, I'll give you a couple of minutes to draft those questions. Okay, let's see. Eduardo. Police reform that I've heard Cindy say, however, that's counterintuitive to me. Okay, hold on. Cindy, do you have day one item that you want to accomplish? That was a question that came in. On day one, when you get into office, what's the first thing you're going to do?
On day one, I think that I have to figure out who I'm hiring for what my staff look like. I mean, you can't run this office without having a good team, around you. So definitely trying to figure out, what that looks like. As we talked about earlier, diversity, and then, get those folks on board, and then we'll just, take one step at a time. I mean, obviously, police reform is top of my priorities. But I think on day one, we're talking about
is there like on day one? So I'll give you an example. So Allison Cripps says the West Gateway seems to be, overlooked. Allison, like always, call us. You have my cell phone number. Do you have it? There's a new dog park that's over there. Also, there's one at Camden. Oh, the mural up in the 2nd District office. Oh, I can't read. I'll get sad. Okay, so the question was like a pet project. So you mentioned, I asked you the other day if you have pets, and I remember seeing your little dog. There's a dog park there. So day one, is there one thing like, I want that dog park done this way, or I want a new bike thing there, or like little things that you see in the neighborhood?
I mean, honestly, so my day one, when I have the power and authority, I just want to make sure that people have these economic opportunities. Like I want, like, where are the grants? I mean, if the stuff that I've already talked to you that I'm passionate about is creating this wealth and housing and affordable housing and that kind of stuff. I mean, those are things that I care about. I mean, obviously I talk a lot about business because I know the wealth that I've created for myself. I've done that through my business, and I want to do that, for other people, and making sure that we have, homes, and we have homes for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's where my priorities are going to be.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to go through these questions. I'll go through one easy question, and then we'll go back to the BLM question that Eduardo asked. So Nicholas, the mural in the 2nd District office is gone because the building's being torn down. So I have pieces of it, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So Charlie wants to hear your business ideas coming out of the pandemic. So I know we kind of asked this, but if you could maybe go through very brief bullet points for Charlie and others. So coming out of the pandemic, we're allowed to go back out. How do we restart the economy and how do we support business?
So especially, small businesses. And so again, we've got to, look at grants and look at licensing fees and one of the things that's always my pet peeve about businesses when you look at, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but most minority owned and small businesses start from their home and they get charged the same as businesses that have storefronts. And we all know that home-based companies don't require the same services or even using the same services. So I think that we really want to look at like how we are assessing those businesses, how those licensing fees are, and then what type of grants that we can that we have out there that can help these businesses get back on their feet. I was really happy about the PPP loans. I do know, and that's through the CARES Act, but I do know that those PPP loans are coming to an end.
Well, and we got new money that's coming back, so we're able to up that again. We just found out last week, so there'll be an announcement soon.
Okay, and so we just and that's great. We just the grants are through through that type of assistance is going to be really important for businesses because they're keeping their employees paid.
Yeah.
And so all of that is is important.
And I'll also share with you, I mean, it's hard being only serving one term because it takes a term to get like real change happening in the bureaucratic system. One of the things we were working on, and one of my recommendations to the city manager, and mind you, for those that understand the way things work, is that we oversee the city manager, we hire and fire the city manager, we get to give them responses, but not directly to department heads. But one of the things I would love to see is our special events team before COVID, we would get some complaints from people saying that it wasn't clear how to have events, everything from a street blockage for a neighborhood street party to Pride Parade or new companies coming in. So one of the things I will give you, I'll write out my proposal and give to you again, that we were just beginning to make progress on, was making sure that economic development and special events were under the same purview, because we really need to make sure that we're have an economic lens to it. Let's make it easier for people to have events. Let's make it transparent. Like, let's not have them wait 3 months to find out it's going to cost them $25,000 to have their event. Cost should be upfront. There should be transparency. There's a lot of bureaucratic red tape that takes a lot of effort to clean up. So we'll talk more about that later. And to the question that I'm going to discuss a dog park over BLM question, we did spend 30 minutes talking about police reform, and I am going to return to the question, as I mentioned earlier, that Eduardo asked.
Okay.
What is your understanding of the BLM demand to defund police, and what is your position on it? I feel like you answered it in a roundabout way earlier, but if you could directly answer it, that'd be great.
So I am completely in supportive of reallocating, funds and saying, okay, there are rules that just don't make sense for police officers to be doing. And I talked about that earlier. I think that's just the beginning of us, reallocating those funds, because it just doesn't make sense. So, so that is my understanding.
So there's when we say defund, there's ways like we talked about earlier, which you listed a series of things that you thought police shouldn't be doing, wellness checks, domestic disputes. You listed a bunch of those. So one, take those off.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't say domestic disputes, just from my personal experience.
You said neighborhood disputes earlier.
Yeah, domestic disputes tend to be one of the most violent things that I've experienced as an officer. But yes, any civil or domestic or any civil disputes like that should absolutely be handled, and that's just the beginning of the list. And I tell you, one of the things that I respect about Eduardo, and I know his heart, I know where he's coming from, and I know how passionate he is about these things, is really leaning on him too when it comes to, this reform and what it looks like, because I know that he's created so much. He has, this is his life, and this is what he's devoted himself to, and this is part of what I was talking about before when I talked about surrounding myself with good friends and good advisors, and Eduardo is one of those when it comes to social justice issues that I would really, lean on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to make sure that we're being clear cut with the question and answer. So to defund, which is a word that some people use, some people say reallocate, you're good, like in this budget cycle. I very much believe that what will come in front of us is an equal cut to Long Beach PD that the city of LA has had. Is that something that you support?
There will be an equal,
so in LA,
$150 million cut. Yes, I mean, we have to. We're going to have to reallocate resources. So I absolutely agree with that. And I love what LAPD I just announced last week, and the way that they were going to, reimagine their community policing and all of that stuff. I absolutely support that. And yes, we're going to be taking budget away to allocate to these, this revisioning process, and that's just going to happen.
Great. So one of them is defunding. The other one is around, they want the money to go towards community health centers. I think I'm having a rough moment right now. I know, Eduardo, you're on. Maybe you could put in the chat box the community health centers. I cannot remember the name of it right now. So I want to be clear that there's a number of requests that BLM has, but your main understanding of that is just the reallocation of funds.
Yes, and anything else? I do believe that that a lot of what BLM has asked. I hope so. A lot of their things have been, people are seriously listening to this and making change. And I want that, for our community, and I want that for our police department.
Great. So Charlie, thank you for lifting this up, and I'll ask it about other city facilities as well. She asked, do you believe that there should be police on school campuses?
That's a great question, actually. My concern is that if there were, an incident or, a shooting or something like that, or someone brings a gun, that, there wouldn't be a way to protect the students. And at the same time, I'm just so conflicted because I want to see, and I think the whole community wants to see more ambassadors and not people and cops in uniforms. We want to see ambassadors, and just like we have in downtown Long Beach. I love what the DLBA has done. And I'm open to those conversations. I'm open to understanding, what this looks like in case there was a real emergency on campus. How do we respond to that? And I'm open to those conversations.
Yeah, I would encourage you. I'm not sure if BLM or you have reached out to talk to each other. I think your support, your background as a police officer has probably really put up a barrier to those honest conversations together. But I think it would really be good for you to have those conversations, because there's an idea around bringing officers on schools that the gut reaction of, well, it's safer because there's somebody there in case something happens. There are a lot of other ways to make schools safe. Like you mentioned earlier at the top of this, around mental health, around having school counselors. You do not have purview over schools as a council member, as mentioned here. Right. But as a council member, we do vote on contracts that allow for our school district to put police officers on school campuses. So you do need to sit with that, and I think figure out. I personally do not support doing that. I've voted on it in the past, and I wish I would have voted differently. But it is something that we can't just vote to say no without saying we're also going to give mental health support, or we're also going to give school counselors. Really having that holistic view is really important. So I think it's a conversation worth having. And outside of schools, the other area that has been very contentious for this council has been the debate over the peace officers at the airport. And there's a bit of a union debate there because it's IAM members, and are they supervised by Chief Luna? What type of training do they have? How many hours of training do they have? Really making decisions based on the safety and the background of some of those conversations. So I know that we're beyond our time for me to go off and ask a bunch of other questions, but those are areas that I would encourage you to spend some time piecing apart a little bit. So let me see what other questions. Community wellness. Thank you, Eduardo. I was like, help, help, help. So we'll close out on Eduardo's comments here, unless I see any other non-bullying, name-calling comments, and we'll pick those up. But Black people thrive when Black people are well. We call for a budget formally devoted to policing to be shifted to culturally responsive, community-centric mental health and wellness services, street outreach for social services informed by de-escalation to build not only community health, but community trust, more housing with affordable rents to end the homeless crisis, along with the end of encampment sweeps. What are your thoughts on encampment sweeps?
Regarding the, we can't, like I said earlier, we shouldn't be going and it's not a police problem. Homelessness is not a crime. So those are one of the issues that I just want to make sure that we don't have police arresting people for being homeless. And then we just have to make sure that we are committed as a city on transitional housing, on affordable housing. For whatever reason, there's a lot of people that fall into homelessness, every day in our city. And I tell you, I've heard the folks say like, oh, these are drug addicts. That's not true. That is not true. There are a lot of, there are mental health issues and there are drug addicts. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm sick and tired of that attitude where we're not going to devote resources and build. And that means that we're going to be building transitional housing, in every neighborhood for the homeless situation. This is one of the defining crises that we have, and for decades and decades to come, and we need to. And I can tell you one of the things by knocking on so many doors is people in the 2nd District are committed and have a heart to help the homeless, and we're all, they're committed to making sure that we do everything to help with that. So sorry to make such a long answer, but
no, it's okay. It's okay. So this was fun. We spent an hour and 45 minutes talking about your position on a lot of things, allowing people to share their questions. I know there were a lot of specific questions sent. I tried to get to the context of those questions in a conversation. Your commitment to meet with neighborhood associations and BLM and other folks. I hope that it happens soon and that people say, oh, we got together. I hope my phone's blowing up with, I met with Cindy.
Please. And then if any contacts that you want to share, again, Cindy@CindyAllen.com, please. I want to have these relationships and I want to start building trust, in the community and its members.
Great. So I'll close this out. I think, as I said at the beginning, and I think I've said before, I've not given my endorsement to you, although people feel like this chat is an endorsement in itself. It's very sensitive for me, this seat, this election. I have lots of feels about it. Roger says use your social media account. I think he's right on that. Oh, sorry, Amara. AB5. Cindy, do you know what AB5 is?
No.
Amara, do you want to share? Oh, now that I'm trying to wrap up and have dinner, you come on with the other questions. Let's see, hold on.
Oh, it's AB5, is that the,
okay. Amara will email you.
Okay.
That's fine.
Go
ahead.
No, I'll just wait for wait for it.
Okay. So I really appreciate you doing this. I hope that the next, 90 plus days are a lot of talk about the second district and how we can continue to improve. I'm obviously very proud of a lot of the work that we've done. There's a lot of work still to be done, and that requires partnership. And so my ask of you is that you continue to partner with as many people as possible, regardless if you agree or disagree. But I thank you for your honest conversation today and for being on and being it's very brave to come on and just spend 2 hours with me to ask you things. So.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone sitting through this and just, getting an opportunity to meet me and be able to answer your questions. And thank you, Jeannine, from the bottom of my heart. I know how much you care about this district. I know, and I know how much this means. And so you have my commitment.
Thank you.
I take good care of it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Appreciate the fun banter. You guys take care. Cindy, have a lovely evening.
Okay, you as well. Thank you.
Bye.